when Jim Harbaugh showed up at that press conference today, he came in a way that he normally does not. He's got his entire depth chart with him. He's ready to talk position by position.
Yes.
Bring guys. You want to know what's happening at receiver? Who are the best freshmen? I'm ready to go. You want to talk cornerbacks? Same thing. I'll break it down from both sides of the line. He's talking about having scouts in practices that one of them called his team meetings and practices and weight room and everything. He says, this is vibrant. And Jim Harbaugh grabbed onto that and kept that word and said, that is it right now. You can tell he is excited about this team.
I agree. And that's where I think this confidence and the problem is, though, it's like, I know we're going to talk about this talent evaluation and who's ahead of who. I know, and both you guys were there, but I think the practices right now are going to be more difficult in those first three games. The competition is keen, and I think it sounds like to me he's insinuating decision making on who are the ones and the twos at that one particular corner spot, and then there's an injury involved in that, or the third wide receiver, or the two tackles, right? Right tackle and the left tackle, and the switch and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I think East Carolina and UNLV and Bowling Green are de facto Saturday scrimmages in terms of making decisions of who's going to get to the one slot. Don't you think?
But is that a bad thing, Clayton?
No, that's the good part of the soft schedule. The bad part of it is that you're having your season ticket holders pay $90 or whatever to watch a scrimmage. That's always been my bugaboo.
Well, yeah, I think I would put it, if I was working on their behalf in some sort of a public relations capacity, which I am not, I would say what you're seeing is laying the foundation for huge success at the end of the year, just like you were, as you saw clearly, J.J. McCarthy take over that quarterback job last year. I'm at the point where, and it's going to only increase next year with not only tougher non-conference opponents, but USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon in the league. At that point, I think, man, you can have all the easy non-conference schedules.
Well, yeah, if you play those teams, I mean, do you actually think that USC and UCLA or Oregon and Washington are going to be on Michigan's schedule next year?
No, I think that they'll play at least a couple of them a year, though, and you add that in with Ohio State every year.
I agree with you.
You throw Penn State or Wisconsin.
I'm with you on that. I'm totally with you on that.
Okay.
But I'm just talking. I'm staying in the moment of this year and how they're going to have to navigate this season, and that's what playing those three teams out. Let's just do evaluation, and I hope there's a ton of kids in there. I hope there's 6 running backs in there, and I hope there's 8 or 9 receivers going in that rotation, because let's treat it what it is.
I would agree. Clayton, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, a couple things. One, I agree that, to me, this team, maybe another team, and even last year's squad, like we saw them face kind of a speed bump against Maryland, especially early in that game in the Big Ten opener after playing, cupcakes the first 3 weeks. They got over it. Then they kind of progressively got better and better. They started to hit their stride, maybe second half of Indiana, some parts of the Iowa game, and then they were kind of off and running. I think this team, with everything they have coming back, they're going to be able to have the starters play the first half, in some of these games, get a big lead, be fresh for when the Big Ten games come around, and they won't really miss a beat. Jesse Minter was talking on BTN the other night, when they were out at training camp, and he said that they're really focusing this year on building the depth. He had 22 guys last year that could play the first half of the first game. He wants 26 this year. And the second thing he mentioned is being healthy and being fresh at the end of the year when it matters most. Michigan really wasn't last year. They got through Ohio State, but the TCU game, I mean, you had some bumps and bruises, some guys that were out, obviously Blake Corum being the most notable. So I like kind of how they're approaching this. And then the competition part to me is something that stands out when everyone asks, is this team going to be complacent? How are they going to have an edge now that they're the team that everyone's hunting, as opposed to being a little bit more of that underdog? They're the Big Ten favorite. But you have competition at so many different positions that I think that's keeping them sharp. And, they're going to be, I think by the time Big Ten play comes around, they're going to be ahead of where they were last year. And Jim Harbaugh said that they're ahead of where they have been in the past. The first scrimmage in the Big House on Saturday was crisp. And, he said freshmen weren't forgetting everything they learned and other guys weren't freaking out in the moment, being in the Big House for that first scrimmage. So I think they're ahead of schedule, and the schedule won't be much of a factor for them. I think they're going to be just fine.
I would agree with that. That was certainly him talking about the scrimmage was a highlight of today. He was very excited about the scrimmage they had at Michigan Stadium. One of the lower points was when he acknowledged that Amorion Walker, who has been battling for a cornerback job, is working through something. That means, you're out and you're hurt.
Injury. That's his word for he's got an injury. Yep.
No doubt about it. And when you're in Amorion Walker's position, what I think that more likely than not, you are going to see someone else other than that young man start in the first football game. And the reason I say that is, he was going into spring ball, talked about by Jim Harbaugh as someone he considered a starter. But then by the spring game, there were some obvious holes in his adjustment that were visible to all. And he was going to work really hard to, learn to be a cornerback. Now, if you're missing a significant part of the fall camp, I just wonder if you have time enough to prove that you've gotten to where you need to be. Clayton, thoughts about that?
Well, the good news on Amorion Walker is Jim Harbaugh said he should be back in 4 to 5 days. We saw him late last week in crutches entering the building during a press conference. So that's obviously never a good sign, but sometimes it's precautionary. So I don't know or not necessarily going to speculate on what exactly it is, but it is good news that it's not long-term, because Jim Harbaugh did talk about one walk-on who does have a long-term injury. So that's good. And maybe he can get, the last week and a half of camp, you have game week, and then you do have some of these early games where he's going to mix in. Corner was one of those spots where Jim Harbaugh said they're going to go with the Michigan method, which is now, what it's called. They're going to play, maybe start a couple guys at offensive tackle or a couple guys at corner the first week, start another group the next week, and see who fares the best by, potentially game 3. So I like that. I think that's going to give Amorion Walker a chance. But at the same time, I agree with you, JB. I think it's going to be someone else opposite of Will Johnson, at least to start the year. And that someone else is Josh Wallace. Everyone we've talked to has raved about not only his maturity, the leadership he's come in with. He was a captain starting his sophomore year at UMass. He's an impressive dude. He had a great interview last week with John Jansen. So I think it's going to be him. And as Jim Harbaugh said, I like to hear this because I've been saying the same thing. They're at their best when Mike Sainristil still can play nickel. And that means someone else has emerged at corner for them to feel good enough about Mike Sainristil still staying at nickel. So I think Josh Wallace might be better than we maybe thought back in June when he joined the team.
So, Tom Crawford, is this another example, if it works out this way, of football free agency allowing these younger players time to come along and get better before they're inserted?
Yeah, Michigan has some pretty good luck with transfers coming in. Josh Wallace, we've been talking about him for months, and then also Jim Harbaugh mentioned Jay McBurrows, I think, today, and Miles Pollard, as far as being in the competition as well. And that's what you want, as well as Keyshawn Harris, the walk-on. What you want is depth. And that's when, once again, take advantage of the one-sided games early on, projected one-sided games early on. And even, game number 4 with Rutgers, the homecoming game. There's a reason that Rutgers is playing on homecoming. Right?
They play in like 7 homecoming games per year.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that's going to be, but like you were, like Clayton was saying, like with the Maryland game, all of a sudden, it's Big Ten, Big Ten. So that might be an adjustment game 4. And I think by the time we get to game 4, that all, that that depth chart, the 1s and 2s are going to be pretty nailed down as far as what we're going to see, and then how deep they're going to go. Because when they go to Nebraska, thankfully that's a noon game. I see that got just announced recently, and not a night game when that was kind of a hairy situation a couple of years ago. When you go on the road, and then Minnesota, which has some good athletes, I mean, you got to make sure this team is hitting on all strides, on all cylinders at that time, and I think they will. And that's the plus side of the schedule that I seem to always complain about. And I'd rather have it the other way from a fan's perspective. And I think you can also be more exposed to your weaknesses when you're going against higher caliber talent earlier in the year. Clean that stuff up when it's exposed. It might not be exposed of lesser talent.
All right, Rutgers, the quintessential bridge between a substandard non-conference schedule and the Big Ten.
Right.
They're somewhere in the middle there. We'll go right back to Tom. Can you picture, Tom, a 6'3", 239 pound kick returner? Alex Orji,
yeah,
Jim Harbaugh talked about as having that opportunity, and he was coaching from the podium. He said, if our blockers on our kickoff team get better, because Alex Orji is also a quarterback.
Yeah.
He doesn't want him getting hurt. He says, we need to, I thought this was kind of a brilliant move. Okay. You're nudging your blockers on the kick team, but you're also talking about somebody that could be one of the greatest kick returners we've had. So your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I look at Alex Orji as a slash guy. Multiple guy, he can do multiple things, and an athlete, if you will, that can be utilized on this team. I mean, when you look back at Michigan, the past several years, there hasn't been. I mean, I'm trying to think when Michigan's kick return team. I mean, J.U. Chesson. I'm trying to think of some others that where there's a threat that Michigan's going to get good, solid returns, both in kickoffs and kick receiving. And so I think that's good. And the size blows me away. I think Bruce Feldman, national media guy, put him on the freak list. I mean, he's really digging deep. That dude's doing his homework, man. He picked up Alex Orji. I mean, that means he's scouring all these Power 5 teams, finding out how these players are going to be utilized. And hey, I go for it. I'll tell you what, if you can set yourself up in good field position, if you get it out to the 30, 35 yard line, that field to go the distance to pay there is much shorter. I think it's I think it's a great thing.
All right, Clayton, your thoughts on Alex Orji, not only as a potential kick returner, but also how does he mix in, if he does, much at quarterback this year?
Yeah, I think he's always been interesting to me. I wrote an article about a month ago about the biggest wild cards on this team. We could see him either not play at all, or you could kind of see this guy have a role. And there were a few guys in that bucket, and Alex Orji was right there. And now I didn't even consider the potential role for him on kick return, but yeah, I think we could see something in short yardage situations. At the same time, do you want to take JJ off the field? I don't necessarily love that. So it feels like one of those things that Jim Harbaugh kind of talks about in the offseason, like Dan Villari is going to be Taysom Hill, and I'm probably blanking on a few other ideas. But I do love that about Jim Harbaugh, how he's a big picture, thinker, and he's always trying to tinker with something. And maybe he had an idea one day to put Alex Orji back there at kick returner, and he has the perfect traits for it. I do want to remind people that Jim Harbaugh ran down on kickoffs as a rookie for the Chicago Bears. So this is not totally unprecedented, although this isn't as crazy as Jim Harbaugh running down on kicks. And I do have a quote from him from 1988 once he was tabbed the starter. He says, I had asked them to be on special teams because I wasn't feeling a part of the game. I was waking up on Mondays feeling like the day before was a stroll in the park. I wanted to wake up with pain again. That's a heck of a quote. And, Alex Orji, I would love to see it, but yeah, you're right, JB. He was nudging the kick return team to make sure they're blocking a little bit better. Cause you can't get a quarterback hurt back there. That would not be good. But he's a freak for sure. So I'm glad he made that list.
Where is he, Clayton? Where is he in the depth chart at quarter? Is he like the 4th string? Where is he at right now?
Yeah, I'd say 3 or 4, right? I mean,
yeah, I wouldn't put him higher than 4. I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about in the red zone, maybe he moved up a little bit, but they've got a couple guys I would think that would be ranked ahead of him just in terms of coming in and running the regular offense.
I would say the pecking order is different when you're looking at if they had to have a guy start a game, it's probably Jack Tuttle or Davis Warren. But, if let's say there's 4 minutes left in the second half and JJ is in the tent or whatever, and you have the ball, you might want to run some plays with Alex Orji. I think they probably, have some good stuff in that playbook for him.
Also, Jim Harbaugh was talking freshman gold when he had his list out, and he was very, very open about freshmen that were coming along. Defensive tackle Cameron Grant, Trey Pierce. You're talking about these guys as outstanding and probably being in the rotation at defensive tackle, even as freshmen. He talked about the corners. DJ Waller, Jared Hill, Cam Calhoun, guys that are coming on fast. You were there, Clayton. Your thought? Were you a little surprised that seeing these names ticked off that quickly? And it wasn't one of those deals where he's going to name everybody on the roster or everybody at a position. He just seemed genuinely excited at some of these rookies.
I think so too. I think there were a couple positions where it felt like he was starting to list everybody, but when he was talking about those freshmen, I think those are guys that generally popped actually at the top of his mind. I don't even know if he was looking down at his list at that point. So I thought that was a little bit telling. And then also the freshman at wide receiver, who Sharon Moore was on BTN last night talking about those 3, how they've impressed. He said, we're going to need them early on in the year. Jim Harbaugh said basically the same thing. How that, Carmelo English, and he went in detail about Samaj Morgan and the way he can catch balls away from his body and all this. I do think a couple guys at receiver are probably banged up right now, so maybe they will need him early on. But I think truthfully, all those guys stood out to him. I don't know how much the D linemen and corners will get in the actual rotation, but I think those are all guys we're going to be seeing in the second half of those first few games. And we're probably going to be saying, Etta at 295 pounds, this dude is legit. So those are definitely names I'm going to be keeping an eye on.
There you go. And Tom Crawford has been talking for some time about wide receiver depth and who is going to step up. You had Jim Harbaugh not just talking in generalities, but talking about how these freshmen were coming out of moves as smoothly and quickly as he had seen before. That's got to be good news to someone such as yourself, who has been saying consistently, okay, what about receiver? What about depth?
Well, when you're following this Michigan football program, and I'll go back to, I think it was the fall of '73 when freshmen could play on the varsity for the first time. And they had Jimmy Smith. Remember Jimmy Smith?
Oh, yeah.
From Blue Island, Illinois. Went on and played with the Steelers. That was the first freshman I ever saw play football. And it's and from that vantage point on, from Jimmy Smith at '73 and all through the '70s, all the way through, it's been the wide receiver position and the running back, the backup running back, who has brought freshmen onto the field the earliest. And why is that? It's the quickest learn because it's more instinctive, right? I mean, these are quote unquote skill positions, also just inherent sheer talent position. And I think Benjamin Hall and Cole Cabana are going to see a lot of action in those early games. I mean, because of the rotation. I mean, I don't think the 2 studs that we keep talking about all the time are going to be there in the second half, and CJ Stokes will then sift out there. But I really think if those 2 kids are healthy and Cole Cabana's put on 20 pounds, I mean, he looked like a skinny running back, when he was over at Dexter. And I'm interested to see that. But that's usually you don't see like offensive linemen, a freshman offensive lineman get on the field because it's such a tough learn. But for running back and wide receiver, that's where you see it.